China is surpassing American strength, whether it be naval forces or nuclear forces.
John Mills is a retired U.S. Army colonel. His 4-decade career has spanned key roles from the Cold War era to the War on Terror. At the Department of Defense, he directed cybersecurity policy.
I was brought into cyber in 2007 when the threat really was Russian cyber adventurism. But by 2012, it was all China. It wasn't even close. For every dollar Russia spent on misadventure, China spent 20.
In this episode, we dive into Chinese Communist Party influence globally and how this has created what Mills calls a world on fire.
All the pieces are kind of in place for Xi to make his move around the world to establish China as the dominant nation state, and all other nations would be tributary vassal states, including the U.S.
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick. Colonel John Mills, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Jan, thank you. It's such an honor to be on your show with you.
So you've said that all or most regional conflicts in the world actually trace back to communist China. So, justify that for me, because that's a big statement.
Well, right now, we live in a world on fire. We have multiple regional conflicts going on. When you start to break them down, every one of them traces to China, whether it's the American home front and fentanyl, Antifa violence in the streets. It's all that traces to China, whether it's Ukraine, the Middle East, the Americas, whether it's Asia. Now, I also like to use the allegory here that in 1939, in the summer, if you asked a group of experts, was the world in conflict? Summer of 1939. Most would harumph and say, well, no, we have something going on in China, we have something going on in Ethiopia, Spain, the rise of militarism in Germany, etc. But there's not a world war going on. And then in September, they changed their mind when the Germans crossed the border into Poland. But if you look at everything, the world was already on fire in summer of 1939. So all of these things, we're living in a very similar time here. There's multiple regional conflicts. When you break down every one of them, everything traces to communist China, and their focus and intent of dominating the world situation. And really, the book in 1999, Unrestricted Warfare, really was, I would say, in many ways, the tipping point and the articulation of the coordinated campaign of China to be the dominant world power through all measures, unrestricted warfare.
As far as you can best tell at this moment, from the perspective of cybersecurity, offense and defense, where are we at? And we know how much there aren't really any actors working out of China that are not connected with the Chinese Communist Party itself.
Well, we're facing a cyber adversary that is led by China, but is not only China. It's also Russia, it's also Iran, it's also North Korea, it's also Venezuela. So there's a complete lineup. The Iranians are very effective and have been very effective at cyber operations, but they are doing this under the command and control of China, under the Ministry of State Security. So this is all a coordinated cyber campaign.
I've heard this too, but how do we know that's real?
Well, I mean, the Chinese actors, you would just read the Department of Justice press releases as they've gone over Iranian hackers. It's clear that they are conducting a target set based upon Chinese priorities, and there's also signed agreements on cyber going back multiple years between China and Iran. So there's signed international agreements that nobody pays attention to. Those signed agreements are pretty important because they spell out, yes, there is an absolute integration of cyber operations.
basically there's various different hacking units. Some of them might be actually in the Chinese military. Some of them might be independent, I'll say it in quote, independent operations. But they're all basically connected and can be deployed as necessary. And they're, in a way, they're competing with each other for demonstrating how well they can do their hacking, what intelligence they can gather, how much money they can steal, how much classified information they can exfiltrate. I mean, it's a very interesting system that where, if you become good, then you get even more, benefits from the regime itself. Can you kind of comment by this whole structure?
Well, what you're really talking about, the Chinese are very good and prioritize gamification of the operation, where just like a social credit score, your individual operators are graded. What can they break into? What can they exfiltrate? What are they returning home as far as value? So it's absolute gamification. Everybody's gamified to compete with each other for this. So that's absolutely what's going on here. That's how they incentivize their different groups to conduct their cyber espionage, but it goes across the spectrum. It's an application of the social credit theory, the social credit program to their intelligence operations and their cyber operations. So they absolutely are being gamified. Now, some would say, well, they're not actually part of the Chinese government. That's like the Chinese that have been found on the battlefield of Ukraine. They wouldn't be there without the express knowledge and permission of China. Now, China also has this very insidious nature of also walking away and essentially throwing under the bus its own operatives too. On one hand, the Chinese gamify and get their people worked into a frenzy to get the best score. Just like us, we want to get points on our credit card, achieve a higher flight status on an airline. It's the same concept, and the Chinese do that. But also, if you're outed, they'll walk away from you, or more often actually disappear the person. So that's one thing that was found out to be interesting, was if the name of one of the Chinese hackers was released, the Chinese usually disappeared them.
For one, they've been compromised, and you can assume that the intelligence services of anybody who doesn't like the Chinese Communist Party are getting whatever they can from that person. Bottom line, when it comes to cyber, when I look at the fact that through these Volt and Salt Typhoon hacks, it seems like these Chinese regime-affiliated hackers are deep in everything. There's access to everything. That's the sense I have from the reality. Have we failed in this? How do we fix this?
Well, this is one thing I've learned from many years of working cyber operations. Oftentimes, the answer to beat down a malign opponent who continues to break in your network is not to go after them in the cyber domain. Oh, they poked another hole in our wall. I'll just plug that hole. No. You want to get their attention. You want to get them to stop misbehaving. Go after something else that they value. It's counter value, not counter force, counter value. So with China, they have a weakness in energy. They have a vulnerability in food. They have great instability at home. Those are things we can poke at. And if they don't like it, and if they start complaining, we just say, well, they need to stop poking at us in cyber, and we'll stop squeezing their energy supply. It's as simple as that. That's the way you get attention and response in cyber oftentimes, because you're going to be able to keep out the lower level operators, but a sophisticated high-end nation that operates with no rule set is going to be able to break in regularly. And they're focusing on critical infrastructure. These are private companies that are operating critical infrastructure to try and make money. They're not military intelligence or intelligence units. They're looking at this from a profit and loss perspective. And it's not their job to be armed with security to protect themselves. If they're getting beat up that bad in cyber, that now becomes a U.S. government problem set because a foreign actor is beating up a U.S. critical infrastructure firm. I saw this during the Obama days. The Biden team probably sat around, did very little, and watched U.S. critical infrastructure get beat up. It's a foreign adversary. That's absolutely is a U.S. government mission.
John, we're going to take a quick break right now, and folks, we're going to be right back. And we're back with retired Colonel John Mills, former Director of Cybersecurity Policy for the Department of Defense. So you were actually one of the people that assessed this intelligence community assessment from the side of DoD, as I understand it, that recently we've been hearing about, that the Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, publicized recently.
Yeah, on I think it's page 74, 75 of my first book, The Nation Will Follow. 2 days after the election in 2016, I was called up on the NSA phone. The person said I had to be on the intelligence community assessment that was assembling to finalize the Russia narrative, because we were going to prove that Trump was a Russian asset and we were going to delay or block the inauguration of Donald J. Trump for the first term. I just couldn't believe.
But this is what you were told?
This is what I was told on the phone. So this was a deep state coup from the beginning, that it actually started in early 2016. We went through the process in November, December. The final product came out in the first few days of January 2017. But bottom line, the supposed top secret review, there was nothing there to show that Russia was trying to manipulate the campaign or the outcome of the election in the favor of Donald J. Trump, that the Trump campaign was somehow colluding with Russia. There was no evidence of anything. So when the document, the Intel Community Assessment, came back to the Department of Defense, because that's what happens in these reviews, the team members, the document, the final end product goes back to all the departments and agencies for review and finalization and approval. When it came back, my recommendation was non-concur. There was no evidence to support any of these assertions. And I was told, John, stand down. No, you don't need to complete the staffing. The secretary, which is Ash Carter, who's dead now, had already signed off because Comey and Brennan were personally hands on keyboard writing this assessment. You never have a director of CIA or a director of FBI personally writing the Intel Community Assessment. That was very brief.
It sounds, even with everything we know today, it sounds kind of nuts.
It was absolutely nuts. It was absolutely nuts. And it was some of the most outrageous things I'd ever said or heard in government service, uniformed or civilian. This was insanity. The voice on the other end, I know exactly who it was, and I put their name to the Durham investigation. John, we're going to finalize the Russia narrative, prove Donald J. Trump is a Russian asset, and delay or block the inauguration. It's never been done before in American history. This is insane. But it shows what was going on. And we were starting in early 2016. We were being fed information in interagency meetings from New York, from the Director of Counterintelligence, who was Charles McGonigal, who's now in prison, who was being paid by the Russians to spread the rumor inside the U.S. government that Trump was a Russian asset.
I just want to touch on that for 1 sec, since we're talking about it. It was Russian money that was funding the rumor that the candidate Trump was a Russian asset.
That is as insane as it sounds. Yes, the Russians were paying the FBI Director of Counterintelligence to spread the rumor it was the Russians that were interested in Trump, were trying to influence the election, and that there was a form of collusion going on between the Trump campaign and Russia. shows the bizarre nature of the Soviet era psyche still permeating through the Russians.
You know, it's just the reason I mention that is this is just not a very well-known piece of the story.
Charles McGonigal is in prison, and he's gotten scant attention. Now, he was charged, I gave a very long statement updated it multiple times to the Durham investigation. During the Biden years, Merrick Garland was into the quandary of they had an absolute problem with Charles McGonigal. Now, they separated that out from the John Durham investigation, said, oh, this had nothing to do with the John Durham investigation. Oh, yes, it did. It had everything to do with the John Durham investigation, because they didn't want to show that Durham was successful in anything. But Charles McGonigal really was derived out of information from various sources from the Durham investigation. He's in prison now. But there's also 5 criminal referrals out of the Durham investigation that have essentially, it's right in the document.
So before the recent South Korean election, you were there on the ground as part of an international election monitoring team. I was at a presser where you gave some of your observations and conclusions and so forth. So I'll read a few of them. One of them was there were significant statistical disparities between early and same-day voting. Another one was there were concerns about the security and transparency of the electronic vote counting systems, irregularities in ballot handling and chain of custody, obstruction of lawful citizen-led monitoring efforts. A lot of things going on that were questionable. I just want to get you to speak to that.
Unfortunately, what we uncovered observing the election situation in South Korea is international election cartel that is intent on influencing elections. It's really aligned with the globalists, but it's also really with China. This is also a key part of the international election cartel, because China has learned, hey, they can influence the election outcomes. But I think some of it, I think we have to go back to the Obama days, where I think it just came out, the incredible amount of money that was spent by Obama through the CIA to influence elections in Israel. Okay, but now we've also uncovered the U.S. aid contribution to influencing elections in Brazil, where a populist, Bolsonaro, lost an election and is now incarcerated by the regime in Brazil, who's aligned with China. But what happened in South Korea, absolutely no question about it. This was an international election cartel that influenced the South Korean election. The numbers just mathematically made no sense. There was Chinese operators at the polling stations. You have this thing called the National Election Commission, which is an unassailable body. It's unauditable, uninvestigatable by the South Korean government. And also a very, very problematic situation is it has members of the South Korean Supreme Court on the board of the National Election Commission, a clear failure to separate powers between parts of the South Korean government. So that was not a clean event that occurred on June 3rd in South Korea, and it's getting scant attention and notice. But there's also this mysterious body called AWEB inside of South Korea, the Association of World Election Bodies, which has the U.S. aid logo all over their website. So fortunately, we've shut down U.S. aid, we've clawed back a lot of money. But unfortunately, it was too late to help the situation in South Korea. Very likely, U.S. aid money went toward influencing the outcome of the election in South Korea. But I would say South Korea, our best friend and ally, better than even our Five Eyes partners, is in a state of crisis right now because of the international election cartel that influenced that election.
Is this something you think the U.S. should be involved in? I mean, there's this, as you know, there's a a lot less of an appetite for intervening in processes, whether it's certainly in military, but also in government processes in other countries?
Well, I'm a firm believer in America first and the Make America Great agenda, okay? Part of this means no new wars, no endless wars, and an avoiding of foreign entanglements. Totally support that. However, we can't just drop a hermetically sealed dome over America and just ignore that there's a rest of the world out there. We do have interests. We do have initiatives we should be promoting. We do have partners out there, trusted partners that we should be coming to the aid to, especially when they are under duress from malign foreign influence operations led by China. This was a Chinese operation. South Korea is our best friend. Are we going to just watch our best friend get mugged, robbed, and brutalized and do nothing? Public statements from the president or other members of the administration are immensely powerful in just acknowledging the situation. It doesn't mean we have to deploy resources, programs, units, personnel. One thing that is extremely appreciated and has immense impact is just the words of the president or the words of a senior official from the administration showing concern. That has huge, that's step one, and that's frankly 70% of the battle. If the South Korean Democrats knew they were under close scrutiny from this administration, things would be very different in South Korea right now. That's what's needed, is just a statement of interest.
Interesting. So there's still a place for U.S. soft power.
Absolutely, absolutely. We need to spend far more time and energy on soft power. And again, the essence of soft power is just saying something. That's the essence of soft power. When bad people know that they're being watched, they behave very differently. And that's when you make a statement about bad behavior, bad activity, it's amazing what happens.
John, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation for me. A final thought as we finish up?
Well, thank you, Jan. I just think we need to understand what's going on around us, have situational awareness, and to realize there is a world on fire. It is intentional. These things we're seeing, even stateside, what's going on in America, this is not accidental. This is not coincidental. Organized groups breaking windows didn't come out of thin air. No, they expect to get paid and organized and directed, and that's what's going on. And so I think we need to be aware of that, and we need America is an incredible, precious experience and experiment in human history, a constitutional republic. Never been one like it, never will be again if those forces intent on throwing it into the trash can are successful. So I think it's worth fighting for and worth defending, and that's what we should do.
Well, John Mills, it's such a pleasure to have had you on.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you all for joining John Mills and me on this episode of American Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Jan Jekielek.